The best way to learn how to create great writing is to study it. So you probably already read a lot, but slowing down and looking and analyzing at how a great author actually constructs their writing is a fantastic way to get better at your own craft. If you go through these scene breakdowns, and there's a growing library of them here on this YouTube channel, you're going to learn three things. First of all, you're going to learn from this particular scene. So you're going to see how George R.R. Martin constructed a scene for his book, A Game of Thrones, and you're going to learn a lot just by looking at this particular scene. Second, you're going to learn how to analyze scenes on your own. So maybe you don't love the scenes I'm going through, but you'll learn how to analyze scenes so you can go look at your own masterworks, the books that you love and care about, and learn from those authors. And third, you're going to learn how to analyze your own scenes. And this is the most important thing, is where you can look objectively at your own writing and make sure that it's working. I picked this particular scene from A Game of Thrones because I wanted to look at a scene with an argument between spouses. These are really hard to write because the characters have a huge amount of backstory that you don't just want to fill in, and they often shortcut the conversation because they already know what the other person is going to say. And so writing these can be really tough. So I wanted to look at one of these. So I pulled this scene. It's chapter 6 from A Game of Thrones. And we're going to look at the objects of desire and the 5 commandments of the scene, because those are the most important elements of any scene writing. So we're going to take a look at that, and then we'll look at a couple other things I like about the scene. So let's jump in and take a look. The inciting incident of chapter 6 of A Game of Thrones is actually off the page. It comes before this scene starts. It is when Ned is offered to be the hand of the king by his friend Robert, who is now the king. Now, having the inciting incident off the page is totally fine. That's very normal. That happens a lot. But you still have to give it a nod within the scene. This is one of the things I see a lot of our students of our workshops get stuck on, is they'll have us look at a scene that's part of a bigger work, and when we analyze it, we're completely lost. We have no idea what's going on in this scene, and they're like, well, yeah, but that's because it's part of a larger work. However, if you take any one scene out of any book that works, you're going to not feel completely lost in that scene. It works in and of itself. And so even though the inciting incident happens off the page, George R.R. Martin still gives it a nod within the scene. And he doesn't just assume you know what everybody's talking about. He tells you what's going on, and that happens right here. "I will refuse him," Ned said as he turned back to her. His eyes were haunted, his voice thick with doubt. Caitlin sat up in the bed. "You cannot, you must not. My duties are here in the north. I have no wish to be Robert's hand." Now, it has been years since I've looked at this book or watched the show, and yet this immediately lets me know what's going on. Something about being Robert's hand, and you find out pretty soon that Robert is the king, and obviously this has something to do with helping Robert. So this is where I pegged the inciting incident, when he is responding to that. Because it's important to remember the inciting incident can't happen by the protagonist. The protagonist can't cause the inciting incident. It has to come from outside of them and knock their life off balance. So him being offered to be the king's hand is the actual inciting incident of this scene. That is what knocks Ned's life out of balance. And we are seeing it here for the first time when he first says he's going to refuse it. So that is the inciting incident. Now, arising out of the inciting incident is the object of desire. And this is the thing that the protagonist wants. And he has to want something, but not while giving something else up. The object of desire is what the protagonist pursues throughout the scene. And it is always worded in the protagonist wants A without having to B. So the protagonist wants something, but if he just wanted something, then he could get it. In any scene we're writing, if there was just something they wanted, well, why doesn't the protagonist just get it? Well, there's always something else creating tension against what they want. There has to be something the protagonist isn't willing to do or isn't willing to give up in order to get that thing that they want, and that's what creates the tension. So in this particular scene, the protagonist, who is Ned, he wants to refuse the king's offer of being his hand, but he wants to do it without putting his family in danger. That's what he truly wants, is to not take the king's offer, but also not put his family in danger. And that is what he is pursuing throughout this scene. So the first thing he tries in pursuit of his object of desire is to just straight say, like, hey, I'm not going to take it. He's the king. He'll understand. And Caitlin provides the first progressive complication to him, which is, hey, he's not your friend anymore. This is the king we're talking about. And if you turn him down, that's going to come back and put all of us in danger. So the first thing that Ned tries is to just say, I'm going to turn it down, and Robert will understand. And Caitlin shoots that down by saying, nope, he's the king now. He's not going to understand. And then Caitlin says, hey, there's honors here. These are good things that are happening to us. Our family is being honored. And Ned makes it clear he doesn't care about this, and he shouldn't care about this. And then Caitlin reminds him, no, accepting this will bring honor to your family, and that is your job, to bring honor to your family. And that is the second progressive complication, which actually then pushes into this progressive complication here, because Ned never even wanted this responsibility. So it's not just that he doesn't want to be the king's hand. He doesn't want any of this responsibility. This was never supposed to be his. So the idea that he's going to take what is already his responsibility that he doesn't want, which is Winterfell, and then add to that being the king's hand, it's too much. And then that's when Caitlin says, hey, it doesn't matter what you want. Your brother died. This cup is passed to you. This is your job. You need to do it. And she reminds him, hey, it doesn't really matter what you want. You have responsibilities, and that's what needs to happen. So that's the next progressive complication. The next thing that happens is that there's this whole thing where their servant comes in and he brings a wooden box and there's a message in it, and it's a message to Caitlin and it's hidden, so she has to deal with reading it, and then she burns the message and all this stuff happens. And all of that brings us to this point right here. Now, the turning point of a scene, it's another progressive complication. So it's just an additional progressive complication, but it is the point where the protagonist realizes they're not going to have their cake and eat it too. They're not going to be able to get A and also not have to do B. So we're looking for the point where our protagonist realizes in this particular scene that he's not going to be able to refuse the king's offer and also not put his family in danger. He's going to have to choose between one of those options. So down here at the turning point, this is when we find out that this person has been murdered, and it was done by the Lannisters. And what this means is that everybody's in danger. So that's what Caitlin uses to push Ned to the point where he's got to decide to go and be the king's right hand. So that's the turning point where Caitlin tells Ned that Jon Arryn was murdered and that it was done by the Lannisters. Now again, in the context of the scene, we don't necessarily know who the Lannisters are or who this Jon Arryn is, and that's okay. We still totally know what's going on in this scene, and George R.R. Martin gives us enough information where we don't get lost in this scene. So now that that turning point has happened, it automatically pushes us to a crisis. And the crisis is the choice the protagonist has to make. Are they going to do X? Are they going to do Y? And these choices has to have consequences. There has to be deep consequences associated with these choices. And this is another reason I wanted to look at a Game of Thrones, because nobody does a good crisis like George R.R. Martin in these books. And so the crisis on the surface is just simply, will he accept the king's appointment to be his hand, or will he not? But I also like to bring it back to the object of desire and word it using the object of desire. So the real choice, the big overarching choice that Ned is trying to make is, will he refuse the king's offer and put his family in danger, or will he accept the king's offer and protect his family? Those are the things he's trying to choose between. Now, a lot of times when we're talking about crisis, people will say, oh, well, isn't it obvious that Ned was going to choose that Ned was going to choose to protect his family? So is there really high stakes in this? Is it really equal stakes in this crisis? And you have to remember that at this point in the book, we don't really know who Ned is. And whenever we talk about character development at Story Grid, we always want to come back to the climax, decisions within scenes, because this is when you see who characters really are. Just like in real life, it doesn't matter what we say, it doesn't matter what we promise to do, it doesn't matter what you think we're going to do. When we're pushed to a point where we have to choose between two things that we really want, then we actually choose. Now you know what's important. If this was a different type of story, or Ned was a different type of character, he might have said, hey, forget my family. I'm staying here and I'm staying safe. I'm not dealing with that. And then they would go a completely different route. And we would know that Ned cared more about himself than his family. And so pushing Ned to this point where he's doing something he clearly doesn't want to do. He has made that super clear throughout this scene. He does not want to take this appointment. And yet he decides to take it because it is what will keep his family safe. And that's where we see him make this decision right here, where he tells her, Caitlin, you shall stay here in Winterfell. And what I like about this climax too is that there's no point where he just clearly states, okay, fine, I'll take the appointment. He just makes the decision, and then we see him start making plans according to that decision. So I pegged the climax right here, because the climax is not when the character makes the decision, because that's in their head. We can't know that. It's when they act on the decision. So this is the first action he takes on the decision. Now, the rest of the scene is the resolution. So this is where they're making plans about who will stay, who will go, who they're going to tell, and all of that. And so I put the resolution all the way down here at the bottom, because this is once the preparations are made of what they're going to do with him leaving Winterfell. And so that is the 5 commandments and the object of desire for Chapter 6 of A Game of Thrones. I hope this was a helpful scene breakdown for you. This was a really fun scene for me to look at, because I like taking these scenes in these books that aren't really known for their social interactions and look at a particular scene that is written so well, where it's just an argument between a husband and a wife, between two partners. There's a clear inciting incident that comes off the page but is nodded to within the text, and then there are clear progressive complications where the two spouses are arguing over what they're going to do, and then a turning point comes in from the outside, and it just pushes Ned to the point where he realizes he can't have his cake and eat it too. So it's a really great scene to study, and again, I highly recommend you do this on your own. Take a book that you love, look at a scene, and identify the protagonist, the objects of desire, and the 5 commandments. Now, if you want to keep going on this, we've got lots of these scenes here available on the YouTube channel. One of them is going to pop up on your screen shortly. If you want to take what you learn in this video a lot further, the number one way you can do that is to get one-on-one feedback on your own writing, where you turn in a scene and then you get feedback from an expert on what you did right, what you did wrong, and how you can improve. And this is why I run scene writing workshops here at StoryGrid. It's a 6-week writing workshop that will help you improve more in 6 weeks in your scene writing than any other time in your writing life. So go down the description, click the link there, and check it out. If you're wondering who I am, my name is Tim Grahl. I'm the CEO of StoryGrid. I'm the author of The Threshing, Running Down a Dream, and Your First 1,000 Copies. My partner, Shawn Coyne, is the creator and founder of StoryGrid, and everything we teach here at StoryGrid is based on his 30-plus years as a writer and editor and researcher. If you'd like to learn more about how StoryGrid can help you, go to storygrid.com, check out all our free resources, and make sure you sign up for the email newsletter. That's where we send out all the latest and greatest stuff. But as always, thanks for being a writer, and thanks for being a part of our community here at StoryGrid. I'll see you next time.